Rev up your engines!
Well, another electric vehicle company, Rivian, is saying they expect to have less profit next year because of the tariffs. They claim they're going to deliver between 40,000 and 46,000 units, right? Now, these things are all made in Illinois, so you might think, why does that affect it? Well, of course, the batteries come from China, right? Chinese make most of the electric car batteries in the world. Now, last year, 2024, Rivian sold a little over 49,000. They're obviously saying they're going to deliver this year less than last year. They're always saying, don't worry, people will start buying more electric cars. No, they aren't. They're not buying more electric cars, especially relatively expensive ones like a Rivian. They said before they're going to deliver 51,000 this year, but now they say, that's going to be more like 40,000. Now, we'll see what happens by the end of the year, right? Their plan is that they're going to lose $1.9 billion building these cars, right? How you can keep losing money and you keep building more of these cars is beyond me, right? It's unsustainable over time, right? Only the United States government can continue to borrow money, not pay it back, and then they run out of more money, so they borrow even more money. Only the U.S. government can do that, right? Rivian is a private company. They make electric vehicles, right? If they keep losing money like that, it doesn't make any sense that they're going to continue to go along. And with the climate as it is today, that's going very anti-battery electric cars. I would be surprised if they only lost $1.9 billion. And I doubt that they'll even sell 40,000 of them this year. So we'll see what happens at the end of 2025. But it doesn't look that good for Rivian. These people jumping on the electric car bandwagon, they're still losing money. They think of any excuse. They can blame the tariffs all they want. But basically, they're selling something most people don't want at a price that's way too high. Well, Toyota now says that the tariffs will erase $1.3 billion in their profit in just 2 months. Well, they got a lot of money, right? Now, a year ago, the world's biggest car maker was Toyota. Toyota in 2024 had the highest annual profit ever recorded by a Japanese firm. So they got plenty of money, right? Let them eat the tariffs. Now, Toyota said, in quotes, it's very difficult to forecast, but they think they're going to lose all that money in a couple of months, right? Well, they got plenty of money. Hey, let them figure something out, right? Understand this. A lot of Toyotas are made here in the United States now, right? A lot of them are made here in the United States. They're not going to be shutting those factories down. If anything, they're going to build more. A few years ago, they built that big one in Alabama. They make Mazdas and Toyotas on the same assembly line. They were doing this long before there were any talk about tariffs and counter stuff. So I think a lot of this stuff is saber rattling. They're trying to say, well, we're not making so much money. Something needs to be done about this, right? Everybody's always whining. Maybe they won't make that much money. They're still making money, people. Don't cry for the rich company, right? They're making lots of money. And they'll always make money if they build decent cars. Their main problem isn't the tariffs. Their main problem is they got to get back to their high-quality Toyota building because they made a lot of mistakes in the last year with some of the way they built them. Cheaper parts, plastic melting, the Tundra V8 engines blowing up, transmissions going bad on vehicles that they're making in Mexico instead of in the United States or Japan, right? I mean, that's where they need to straighten the ship, not blame it on tariffs. Get your act back into gear, Toyota, because you're starting to go the wrong way. Do you want to end up like GM falling over the cliff, or Chrysler, which pretty much doesn't even exist anymore other than Dodge trucks? Chrysler makes 2 vans that hardly anybody buys anyways. I mean, you better watch out. Better stop whining and do something about it. Well, Ford has now hiked prices on their Mexican-produced models, saying it's the tariffs. Effective May 2nd, so it's already happened. Ford says they're raising prices on 3 of their models, up to $2,000. This is on the Mustang Mach-E, they're all made in Mexico. The Maverick, they're all made in Mexico. And the Ford Bronco Sport. All the Bronco Sports are made in Mexico. The regular ones are made in Michigan. They're made in the United States. But those are all made in Mexico. So they're going to raise the price. They said, because of the tariffs. Hey, you know what I say to Ford? Too bad. You moved the production of those things down to Mexico to save money, to make them cheaper. Ha, ha, ha. And now what are you doing? There's a tariff. We have to raise the price. You made them down there cheap. Eat it, Ford. Eat it. That's what I say. Eat that price differential. I'd say, oh, you're going to charge more money for it, right? Now, they're walking a slippery slope here. If they raise the price, especially on the Mustang Mach-E, that electric pile of junk that they make, right? They can barely sell them as it is. I've only ever seen one of them on the road. Now, I did see it twice. It was in Providence, Rhode Island. I saw it once, took a picture, saw it again, took a picture, and I looked. It was the same license plate. So that's the only one I've ever seen on the road, driving down the highway, right? They can't give those things away. So they raise the price for it. It ain't going to help your sales any, right? It is not going to help your sales. And look at the Maverick pickups. They have all these recalls on them, right? Okay, you getting all these recalls. Oh, we'll raise the price on it too. What the heck? Quality stinks, but I think it's hilarious. You know? Well, we have to now. Well, you moved them down there. Tough baloney. That's what I say. You moved it down there. You should eat that. Not go back to the consumers, right? I mean, let's face the facts. They moved down there to make them cheaper. Did they lower the price to us? Of course they didn't, right? But now there's a tariff, they're going to raise the price. You know, there's a simple way to avoid all this. Don't buy one. I wouldn't buy a vehicle made in Mexico anyway, so I don't care. And I advise you not to either. Well, even the Chinese electric car giant BYD has changed their European strategy. It's now going to build PHEV hybrid cars alongside their battery electric vehicles in their factories in China. If you never realized, look, even the Europeans are giving up with they're only going to buy battery electric cars. They're pushing more hybrids too. It only makes sense, right? You don't have range anxiety. Instead of having these giant batteries that cost a fortune, they're a fraction of the size of the giant batteries. They're cheaper to make, they weigh less, so they get better fuel mileage because the biggest problem of battery electric cars are they need gigantic batteries to power something as heavy as a car full of people, right? But giant batteries weigh a bunch, so they use more power to push themselves along. Then they have range anxiety. A hybrid does not have range anxiety because it has what we've been using for years. Gasoline or diesel tanks that have a lot of energy in them and they fill up real fast. There's an infrastructure all over the world to fuel them up with. Even the Chinese are starting to say, well, no, the battery electric wheels, we're going to build more hybrids to sell to the Europeans. BYD is a gigantic car manufacturing company and they're swaying with the wind too. The wind blows this way, they go that way. The wind blows this way, they go that way. Now they're going more to the right and saying, battery electric vehicles, well, we're not going to push them as much as we were before. They're going to bring Yugo back. I don't know if you remember the Yugo. Basically, they were Fiats, copies of old Fiats that were made in Yugoslavia. And everybody always laughed at them because they were such rolling little piles of crap, right? They were cheap, though. I'll give them that. They didn't cost much, right? But when they had that big war and stuff in Serbia, they blew up the Yugo plant. That was it. Nobody was going to rebuild it. Who wants to rebuild a factory building those crappy cars? Well, now they say it's coming back. The first drivable prototype of Yugo is going to launch in 2027 at the Belgrade Expo. So it's still 2 years coming, right? Now, the only thing they had the Yugo going was it was cheap. It didn't cost much, and that's why people bought it. People didn't have much money in Europe. See, in Europe, they don't have extra income like we do in the United States. They don't have free money to spend, expendable income. They're pretty tight. So they sold a lot of them there. Now, if you were a real cheapskate and you took care of it, I got friends that had them in Canada. And they didn't mind them. They were manual transmissions, no horsepower or anything, but they got really good gas mileage, right? Probably in the United States, everybody drives automatic transmissions, and those little things, when they had an automatic, were rolling piles of crap, and there was no infrastructure. There really wasn't a bunch of Yugo dealers. You couldn't get parts for them. Most mechanics didn't know how to work on them, right? But for some reason, they're planning on bringing the Yugos back. They say they're going to launch with combustion engines, with manual and automatic transmissions, and they might even make electrified versions. They say that we won't even see a full-scale drivable prototype until May 15th of 2027. Okay, they're not even going to have a prototype to look at, not a production model, but a prototype until May of 2027. So I wouldn't put much money that they're actually ever going to make these Yugos. They're probably just making a splash, taking a name, seeing if they can sucker some investments, get people's hard-earned money and invest it in Yugo, and then, well, God, we're not really going to make them. Oh, what the heck? Your money's not in the toilet, right? So unless you're some kind of diehard Yugo fan, I would stay far away from investing money with these guys. If they're talking about, well, we'll have our first prototype a couple of years from now. What the heck? They were just a cheap, crappy copy of a Fiat that in their day, they sold quite a few of them, especially in Europe where people don't have that much money. But I mean, they're probably just taking it in name only. All the molds are destroyed. Everything was destroyed. And they would just be starting up some kind of new vehicle and calling it Yugo. And just like Toyota sells Toyota Supras, they have nothing to do with the old Supras. They're just rebadged BMW Sportsters, right? That's all they are. They're made in Austria with the BMWs. They're not made in Japan. Toyota doesn't make them. BMW makes them. It's probably the same thing. They're just taking the name and they're trying to sucker investments. Well, of course, you know that businesses will find strange but legal ways to avoid all these Trump tariffs, right? There's always going to be ways to do stuff, right? The most popular one is what's called a bonded warehouse. You can bring stuff in the United States, it's put in a bonded warehouse, and it isn't sold. It's just sitting there. It defers the tariffs until you decide to say, okay, now we're taking them out of bond and we're going to sell them. Now, things can stay in a bonded warehouse for up to 5 years, so. And there's also other sneaky ways, because these are bureaucrats, right? Let's say there's a tax on sneakers, right? Well, it turns out that they don't have such a tax on slippers. So, if you put felt on the sneakers, you can call them slippers, and no longer they have the big tariff that sneakers have. Anytime somebody comes up with something, other people are going to find a way to avoid it in the first place. I mean, first of all, it's all based on trust. What's in that container? Oh, don't worry about it. It's just slippers, right? Something like less than 3% of the container ships coming from China, those individual containers, less than 3% of them are even looked at by anybody, right? Yeah, they got the manpower to go through every one, open every box, see what's in them. Of course they don't. Now, of course, the bonded warehouse people love it. Their business is really going wah-wah, right? And who's to say what sneaks in and out of the warehouses? I mean, there's so many ways out of these things that they're not going to collect maybe years from now, or they'll kind of siphon them out, right? I mean, there's so many ways to bypass things like this to make your head spin. After all, the Customs Bureau, it's a government bureaucracy. You think they're going to do an efficient job? Of course they aren't going to. And people will find a way out of it. I'm sure a bunch of people will send something from China to some other country, then send it to the United States. Who's going to know? Right? This idea that a simple thing like a tariff is going to solve any problems. It's obviously causing a lot more problems than it's solving. Well, it turns out there's wind theft. Yes, there is wind theft for wind farms. And of course, did anybody ever bother to think about this? And guess what? They affect the atmosphere. They affect around them. And now they're finding that they're getting all kinds of drag and wind slowing down because one windmill, then another windmill, and they accidentally steal each other's winds, and they don't have as much energy. Let's face the facts. If you take a certain amount of energy out of a system, you could see the Earth is a giant ecosystem, right? And if you put a whole bunch of these things in one area, yeah, it's got to slow the wind down. You have energy, it's taking energy away from the system. Just like one person said, if you put solar panels and covered the Sahara Desert with solar panels, it would make the Sahara Desert so hot, and it already is hot, that it would affect world climate, the jet stream, all kinds of things. Well, now they're finding out, gee, these windmills are stealing the wind from each other, and it can go a long distance. Turns out that the wind's slower behind each turbine in their own wind farm. And that this wake that slows the wind beyond the wind farm can go as far as 62 miles. It's going to affect things. Who knows? Is it going to affect wind patterns? If they build enough of them, it certainly would. They call it wind theft. But of course, the Norwegians who are pushing it said the term wind theft is a bit misleading because you can't steal something that can't be owned, and nobody owns the wind. That's a Norwegian lawyer for wind farms, right? What else is the guy going to say, right? Now, I had a physics teacher, Mr. Philby, in high school, and he said something. You can't get something for nothing. Right? If you take energy from one thing, it's going to change something somewhere else. Like the old butterfly effect. If you went back in time and stepped on a butterfly in dinosaur ages, it could affect what happens in the future, right? Because everything's interrelated. You start taking all this energy from one area, it's going to affect things. Just like if you filled the Sahara Desert with solar panels, it gets so hot, who knows what would happen. Now they're saying, oh, in less than 5 years, we need to develop thousands more turbines in Europe. And then here's what a European scientist said. The denser and bigger the wind farm, the stronger the drag, the more it affects the wind. You can't keep taking something and expect it not to affect what's going on, right? That's just the way that it goes. And something as intricate as wind patterns and weather, if you started taking tons of energy from it, it is going to affect things, right? Nowhere near as large as they want to build, thousands and thousands of more. Who knows what would happen? Other than I guarantee you they'll break a lot faster than they claim they will. And then they'll say, I guess we were wrong. They really don't last 20 years. More like 7, and then they fall apart. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.